Hi everyone, Susan Storm here. I'm the founder of PsychologyJunkie.com and a certified MBTI practitioner, and today we're going to explore the ISFP personality type. If you're trying to find your best fit type and this is one of the types you're considering, then you're in the right place. We're going to look at those letters and really understand what they mean, and we're also going to look at the ISFP's cognitive functions to get a deeper look at what makes ISFPs unique, how they perceive the world, and how they make decisions. We're also going to look at signs that you are an ISFP, as well as ways that I cope with stress. So let's go ahead and get started. First, let's start with the basics. ISFP, what does that even mean? The I in ISFP stands for introvert. Introverts get their energy through alone time, and their energy tends to flow inwards towards thoughts, ideas, and perspectives. The world inside their mind is the most fascinating world to them. They're going to assess inwardly before they assess outwardly what's going on around them. Next, the S in ISFP stands for sensing. Sensing types are very in tune with the tangible realities of life. They focus on what they can see, smell, taste, touch, and hear through their senses. They're interested in experiences and they're interested in facts more than they're interested in abstract theories or hypothetical questions or concepts that are detached from reality and real experiences. Next, the F in ISFP stands for feeling. This means that when ISFPs have a decision to make, they are more likely to trust their heart. They're going to look at their values and consider what's important and meaningful to them based on their values. They're going to look at their emotions and try to find out what their emotions are telling them. And next, the P in ISFP stands for perceiving. Perceiving types tend to approach life with a sense of exploration and adaptability. Rather than having a really strict regimented schedule or routine, they like to go with the flow and they like to adjust so that they can be ready for anything as it happens rather than feeling like they're trapped in a really specific routine or specific schedule. So this just covers the basics. Let's get a little bit deeper by looking at the ISFP's cognitive functions. What are the cognitive functions? The cognitive functions are mental tools that you use to perceive the world, to understand what's happening around you, and to guide you when you're making decisions. Each personality type has access to all 8 cognitive functions, but we all have certain ones that are more valued and prioritized and natural to us, and certain cognitive functions that are a little more confusing or in the shadow for us. For ISFPs, the dominant function is called introverted feeling, or FI for short. Now, the dominant function is the one that feels the most natural. It's the most easy for you to use. You could think about it as your preferred hand. When you're writing, if you're right-handed, then it's just more natural for you to sign your name with your right hand, and it comes out looking pretty good. But if you were to try to write your name with your left hand, it might take a lot of concentration, and it might feel really overwhelming, and you might not be happy with the results. In the same way, if you're left-handed, you would have the reverse experience. So your dominant function is kind of like your preferred hand. It comes more naturally. You tend to produce better results when you're in the energy of your dominant function, and it tends to feel energizing to use. The more you use your dominant function, the more energized and empowered you tend to feel. In fact, psychologist John Beebe calls this function the hero function, and I think that for many personality types, this is the function that they tap into when they're trying to save the day, when they're trying to make a big difference. So now that we know what the dominant function is, let's talk about what introverted feeling is. Introverted feeling is all about looking inward towards your values and personal convictions. It's about listening to your feelings, being affected by them, and trying to decide where your feelings are guiding you. But it's not just about mindlessly giving into your emotions and whatever you feel. It's about analyzing those feelings in depth and parsing them out and looking for your true motivations. For example, you might immediately feel really angry at someone when they don't give you your way. An introverted feeling type wouldn't just give in to that feeling because their emotion is telling them something. Instead, they would take that emotion apart and try to understand the roots of why they feel angry. So introverted feeling isn't just about emotions, because we all have emotions. It's about understanding the roots of those emotions, understanding the core components of those emotions. Just as introverted thinking likes understanding the components of all these little logical data sets, introverted feeling wants to understand the core root of each emotion, the history of it, have a really deep understanding of it, so that they can make decisions that feel right to them, that feel well thought out. Introverted feeling asks, am I living in accordance with my values? Am I doing what I believe is right? Am I being real and genuine in the way I live my life? When I look back on my life, is it something that I can be proud of? Extroverted feeling tends to look at social values. It tends to look at how other people are impacted. And so it tends to ask, how am I impacting others? How do other people feel? What's the mood of the room? How can I keep everything harmonious? Introverted feeling instead asks, how do I feel? Do I feel this is right? Am I living in authenticity with myself? And am I following my own values, or am I just doing what everyone else is doing? So there's a very individualistic quality to introverted feeling. It is less concerned with the group and less concerned with peer pressure and what everyone else is doing, and more concerned with how can I live in a way that feels right to me, that I can feel proud of, that I can feel like I have inner integrity around. Carl Jung, who is in many ways the father of psychological type and who wrote the book Psychological Type, says of introverted feeling, still waters run deep is very true of this type. He says of introverted feeling types, they are mostly silent, inaccessible, and hard to understand. They have feelings that are deep but seldom expressed, because inner tenderness and passionate conviction are both masked by reserve and repose. So there is a very mysterious, enigmatic quality to introverted feeling dominant types. They tend to have a lot of really deep, intense, rich emotions and feelings. You may not see it on the outside. In fact, Isabel Briggs-Myers, who is the founder of the MBTI, said that introverted feeling is like a fur-lined coat. All the warmth is on the inside. It's not visible to the outside world. The warmth is there, but you may not see it. So a lot of stereotypes and memes and content you'll see about INFPs and ISFPs describes them as being these really hyper-emotional, hypersensitive, weepy types of people. And often that's not the case, because they actually tend to be pretty protective of their inner feelings, not just sharing them with just anyone who comes around. On the outside, they can look like thinking types, especially ISFPs, because they have that sensing, pragmatic side as well. They can look very pragmatic and aloof, but you have to ask yourself what's driving them in their life. And for ISFP, what's driving them is a sense of conviction, a sense of authenticity, and a drive to do what they feel is personally right for them, and to live according to their own personal values, and to be true to themselves, and to follow their heart. This is the driving force of the ISFP. They need to have a feeling of integrity and rightness in every decision that they make. Next, let's look at their second cognitive function, their auxiliary function. This is called extroverted sensing, or SE for short. Now, the auxiliary function is very much the support system for the ISFP. The dominant function is the hero. It's the one that comes most naturally. It's often the one that is ready to take charge. And the auxiliary function provides balance. It's the supportive parental type of function that asks, maybe we should look at this here, and maybe we should consider these other factors, but in a supportive and nurturing way. Extroverted sensing tends to be the way that ISFPs nurture themselves, and it also tends to be the way that they nurture and take care of others as well. Psychologist John Beebe calls the extroverted sensing side of the ISFP the arms of their personality type. It's the way that they reach out and help others, and also the way that they nourish and nurture themselves as well. So extroverted sensing is all about staying tuned in to the present moment and to the facts and details around yourself. It's about experience and facts more than it is about abstract hypotheses or concepts. Extroverted sensing drives the ISFP to have real-world immersive experiences, and it also drives the ISFP to combine their introverted feeling values and that conviction and passion into something tangible. Many ISFPs have a creative side. It may be through art, it may be through performance, it may be through culinary skills. There are so many ways that they can use their creative abilities. But ISFPs like to bring their convictions and passions and their ideals into something real. I know so many ISFPs who are incredible artists, whether it be through painting or being a tattoo artist or even dancing. They want to find a medium that they can use to bring that inner passion, that emotional intensity that they don't often just reveal to everybody. They often reveal that through a creative form. But the extroverted sensing of the ISFP also gives them an adventurous side at times. Many ISFPs love to immerse themselves in rich sensory experiences like hiking or even whitewater rafting, or going to concerts or plays, situations and experiences where they can really explore the sights, the sounds, the textures, the colors, the tastes around them. I know so many ISFP foodies who really get into the nuances of flavor in food, and they love trying out the best new restaurants or the hole-in-the-wall restaurants that no one's ever heard of, or they really enjoy experimenting with cooking to get the right combination of flavors. Because they're so attuned to colors, tastes, textures, and the world of the senses, they often know how to combine those things into making a really aesthetically pleasing result. The extroverted sensing of the ISFP also gives them a realistic perspective. They tend to be realists. More than living in the imagination, they like to live in the real world. For ISFPs, life is about living in the moment. It's about finding the beauty and the joy and the meaning and richness in the moment, more than it is about hypothesizing or daydreaming about the future. And that's one way you can tell apart an ISFP versus an INFP, because INFPs are very much in their imagination. They're very focused on extrapolating possibilities for the future, and so they tend to be in their head a lot, thinking about things that they could create someday, or things they could do someday, or the possibilities they want to imagine and realize someday, whereas ISFPs tend to be much more focused on now, what they can do now, what they can experience now, what they can experiment with now in the moment. Next, let's look at the ISFP's tertiary function, which is introverted intuition, or NI for short. Introverted intuition is in many ways the opposite of extroverted sensing. Rather than looking at the real world facts and experiences that one can have, introverted intuition is looking for a deeper meaning behind things. It's looking at the abstract world, the intangible world. It's looking for patterns and predictions and insights. The extroverted sensing side, the ISFP, would walk through a forest and be like, oh, look at the way the light filters through those leaves. Whereas the introverted intuitive side of the ISFP would say, this tree really symbolizes protection for me. This makes me think of some kind of protective grandfatherly deity that's looking out for me. So introverted intuition has this symbolic focus. It thinks in metaphors, and it also tends to see things not as they are, but what they symbolize or what they could mean, or they look at things for spiritual significance or symbolic significance, or they read the current situation and look for patterns and predictions and ripple effects, trying to figure out how one thing now could lead to something in the future. I've known so many ISFPs who are interested in spirituality or Celtic mythology or Norse mythology or tarot readings, things that give life a little bit of mystery and a little bit of depth and meaning, but at the same time, they are very realistic. While they enjoy pursuing these more abstract things from time to time, this isn't their most natural focus. They are more comfortable and at ease in the world of the senses, in the world of experiences, in the world of facts and reality. But they do enjoy playing in the world of mysticism and abstract and the conceptual side of life as well from time to time. Some ISFP lean really heavily into their tertiary function. This can result in something called an FINI loop, which I think I've made a video about. An FINI loop happens when an ISFP just loops back and forth between introverted feeling and introverted intuition. When this happens, they become more detached from reality. They become much more stuck in their head. They'll get gut feelings about things and then just believe them 100% rather than testing them with facts and real world experiences. This kind of an ISFP can look pretty detached from reality. They can look very hard to read. They can be extremely reclusive and have a harder time putting anything out into the world. They have a harder time doing anything productive, because their outward focused functions, extroverted sensing and extroverted thinking, are being repressed when they're in the loop. And then you have ISFPs who are more out of touch with introverted intuition, and they are very in tune with their feelings, and they are using those feelings to channel them into something real. They are tapped into their emotions, they're tapped into their convictions, but they're also tapped into real world experiences and output. and living life in the moment. And this is healthy. And if they take it too far and they get too detached from introverted intuition, then sometimes it can create a situation where they aren't thinking about the long-term implications of what they're doing as much as they should. They might leap before they look, but they might lack the long-term focus that introverted intuition can provide. Introverted intuition is very focused on future, whereas extroverted sensing is very focused on now. So when ISFPs are warped over to the side of extroverted sensing, sometimes they can make a lot of decisions that are very focused on immediate gratification, but they aren't thinking about how is this going to play out in the future, and then they can face backlash or repercussions as a result. So it's important to have a healthy relationship with all of your cognitive functions. You should always give introverted feeling the most airtime. That's your dominant function. This is the one that is going to be the most energizing for you. So it's important for ISFPs to get time alone to process their feelings. It's also important for ISFPs to get into the extroverted sensing part of themselves, to have new experiences, to experiment with their hands, to try new things. And then it's also important for ISFPs to have some space for introverted intuition, to play with the mystical side of life, to look forward rather than just in the present, to think, how is this going to impact me later instead of just, what do I want to do now? And then we get to the inferior function for ISFPs, which is extroverted thinking, or TE for short. Extroverted thinking is very focused on metrics, objectives, results, and what will pass versus what will fail. It's focused on objectivity and logic. So the extroverted thinking side of the ISFP is one that they tend to feel a little bit uncertain or vulnerable around. ISFPs feel pretty certain in the world of introverted feeling. They trust it. They trust their heart to tell them what's right and wrong. They trust their instincts and their heart to guide them. What's harder for them is to just pull back from all their personal feelings and just look at the situation through a totally impersonal, logical lens and focus on what's going to get me from point A to point B. And that's what extroverted thinking does. It's less concerned with how do I feel, what are my emotions telling me, or what are my values, and it's more concerned with what resources do I need to meet a particular objective and what's the most efficient and effective way for me to reach this objective. Let me put my personal feelings aside and just look at the logic of the situation. There's a very direct, blunt, decisive, focused quality of extroverted thinking. But it can feel very uncomfortable for ISFPs because it often flies in the face of introverted feeling, which is more slow, intensive, and more feeling focused. It's more value focused. It's more heart focused. So sometimes just detaching from that and focusing on objective logic and what's going to get me to my end result as quickly as possible can feel like a violation at times to ISFPs. It can feel wrong in some ways. It can feel like it's not honoring the personal code of the ISFP or even the personal code of other people. ISFPs tend to avoid giving a lot of criticism to other people because they feel like everyone else is walking their own path and trying to follow their own heart and has their own voyage in life that they need to embark on. That said, extroverted thinking is still a valued part of the ISFP. Even though it is the inferior function and there can be a lot of vulnerability around it, it is still something they value. When we interact with the outside world, we are often using our extroverted functions, which for ISFPs is extroverted sensing and extroverted thinking. So this is what we're often going to see with an ISFP when we're dealing with them, is that extroverted sensing side, which is focused on details and experiences, as well as that extroverted thinking side, which can sometimes come in with this really astute, logical advice and wisdom. So ISFPs can seem very pragmatic when they're dealing with other people, when they're offering advice, when they're in the workplace. But at the same time, it's going to always be colored and shaded by introverted feeling. There is going to be that personal quality, that heart-driven quality. Sometimes what happens is that ISFPs lean so heavily on introverted feeling and they avoid extroverted thinking so much because it does tend to feel so uncomfortable that they wear out introverted feeling and they leave extroverted thinking in a very immature state of existence. So we tend to think that our dominant function is the right hammer for all the nails. It's the right tool for all the jobs. And so ISFPs tend to feel like introverted feeling is the right way to handle every situation, and sometimes extroverted sensing as well. So as you go through life and then encounter more and more situations, the ISFP is going to try to keep solving them with FI and with SE. But as situations unfold and if introverted feeling isn't solving the problem, or the situation just stays difficult and chronic, then what can happen is introverted feeling eventually wears out because the ISFP is relying on it so heavily to solve everything. And over time, it can't take anymore. So when ISFPs are experiencing really chronic or extreme stress, they're first going to rely on introverted feeling, and they're going to use it till it wears out. And then extroverted thinking is going to take over. And when this happens, if extroverted thinking is really immature, which it often tends to be because it's the inferior function and they do tend to repress it, then when it takes the wheel, when ISFPs are in the grip, it tends to show up in this kind of bossy, critical, domineering, no-nonsense way. Suddenly, ISFPs are finding problems and errors everywhere. Things are not as efficient as they need to be. They become fixated on accomplishing tasks and objectives. They're more quick to give criticism, not only to others, but to themselves. And they just tend to appear really unlike their normal selves. Naomi Quenk, who is a psychologist and who also wrote the book, Was That Really Me?, did a whole study on the inferior function and how it tends to show up during times of stress. And for ISFPs and INFPs, who both have inferior extroverted thinking, she called them the criticizers. When they experience really extreme stress, that extroverted thinking can flare up, and it can make them very critical, and they can start pointing out problems and flaws in the world around them and in people around them. Suddenly everything just seems wrong. They get very task focused. Usually when this is happening, it's very uncomfortable for the ISFP because they're like, what is happening to me? I don't know what I'm doing. This is not how I normally am. It can almost feel like an out-of-body experience. If you've ever had one of those dreams where you're doing something but you don't know why, and you're watching yourself from a distance going, stop, what are you doing? Like, this is often how a grip experience feels when you're in it. However, ISFPs can develop a healthier relationship with extroverted thinking. They can do this by questioning things and asking, is this really the most logical way to complete a project? Or am I just doing this because this is just what my instincts are telling me? When they take little pockets of time to devote to extroverted thinking through questioning their agendas and their opinions logically, or strategizing a particular way to reach their goals in the most effective manner, when they do this for little pockets of time without too much time that they're wearing themselves out, then they start to develop a healthier and more mature form of extroverted thinking. And then when that happens, when they encounter these grip stress experiences, they tend to react in a more mature way. They might be able to say, you know what, I'm feeling super stressed. I need to focus on tasks and projects. And I'm feeling like I need to just blame everyone around me and criticize everyone around me. But actually, let me just focus on getting this one thing done, because I know I will feel a lot better when I do. I'm feeling really stressed. Let me just take some time and organize this drawer. And then I'm going to slow down and I'm going to breathe for a little bit, and then I'm going to go back into the world, but I'm not just going to tear down other people and just start pointing out all the ways everyone around me is wrong. But if you understand that this is how you experience the grip, then when you are going through it, you can catch yourself and be like, wait a minute, what's something that my inferior function needs right now that I can give it without hurting my relationships? So for ISFPs, that could be organizing a drawer, making something in your life more efficient, or taking something in your life and organizing it. This satisfies extroverted thinking while also not being something that you're blowing up your life in the process. So you need to find little pockets of time to do something manageable and small that allows extroverted thinking to have some say in your life. So now let's look at some signs that you are an ISFP. Sign number 1, you are deeply affected by the pain and suffering of other people. Although you may seem very mysterious and even stoic on the outside, you are deeply feeling on the inside. You are tremendously affected by the pain, unhappiness, or trauma of others. You instantly imagine how it must feel to be in their shoes. This empathy tends to grow as you age and mature. You might find yourself feeling really troubled or sensing a deep pain in your heart and a lump in your throat as you hear about the afflictions that other people have experienced. It's very easy for you to put yourself in someone else's shoes. And this tends to give you a real drive to help a cause that matters to you. Many ISFP have a real heart for the underdogs, for the misfits, for the marginalized people or animals of the world. And this really comes down to that being affected by the pain and suffering of others. Number 2, you tend to show your affection more through actions than words. You're typically not someone to verbalize a bunch of effusive praises to people on the spot. You're not like one of those really showy, effusive, verbal processors. Rather than whispering sweet nothings to someone you love, you're more likely to shovel someone's snow or make them a mixtape of songs that made you think about them. Your feelings, although deep, are very private and internally felt. You tend to show your affection and love through acts of service and helpful gestures and listening and just being present with someone or giving them a good experience more than just a lot of verbal affirmation. Number 3, you take a while to get to know. You're not someone who immediately wears your heart on your sleeve or shares everything about your life story with someone else. You need to know that you can trust someone before you share your true feelings, your pain, or your tough experiences in life. Number 4, you try to hold space for people's unique differences. It's crucial for you to be open-minded to the experiences and worldviews of others. You are very much an individualist. While you hold very tightly to your own beliefs and passions and convictions, you also realize that everyone else is shaped by their unique perspectives and experiences. You tend to be very quietly accepting of others unless they're sharing beliefs that are condescending or harsh to your personal values. 5, you crave freedom. You do not like being trapped by a lot of structure, schedule, rules, and guidelines. You want to feel like life is an adventure and that you are free to choose your own path and that you can adapt as new things come your way, that you have the freedom to be spontaneous, the freedom to follow your heart, and the freedom to switch directions as life evolves and changes for you. Because of this, it's hard for you to make a lot of really big long-term plans and commitments because you hate the idea of being tied down or trapped by anything. So these are just 5 signs that you're an ISFP. There are many more. I'm going to link in the description to an article I've written called 24 Signs That You Are an ISFP Personality Type, and there's a lot more information there. And there's many more articles on my website about ISFPs. You can check that out at psychologyjunkie.com, but I will post some of the most relevant articles in the description. You can also check out my book, which is Discovering You, Unlocking the Power of Personality Type, or you can book a type clarification session with me where I can help you understand your type better, or if you're feeling unsure about your type, I can help guide you through the process of finding your best fit type. Subscribe for more videos like this, and I will see you next time. Bye, everyone!